I am now excited to introduce our next panel on food access and affordability. Moderating this discussion is the amazing and wonderful Sweta Chakraborty, the CEO of We Don't Have Time North America. Give her a big round of applause as she makes it to the stage. Joining her, we have Brandon Lombardi, the Chief Sustainability Officer and Chief Legal Officer of Sprouts Farmers Markets. Julia DeSantis, the Head of Sustainability at the Farmlink Project. Nicholas Bertram, who is the CEO and President of FlashFood. And Erika Thiem, who is the Chief Supply Chain Officer of Feeding America. Give it up for all of them, please. Hey.
Okay, this is a very fancy setup. I am so thrilled to be moderating this panel, and as somebody who has seen Food Tank evolve over the years, I must say this is definitely one of my favorite spaces. And one thing that stayed the same regardless of where Food Tank moves to is the crowd. The room is always filled, so thank you all for showing up and engaging. It's the last day of the week, and so I think this first fireside chat really set the energy, and we're gonna keep that energy up, and all of you, please continue to stay attentive, because these conversations, as you all know, are super critical. So it's no coincidence that New York Climate Week is happening simultaneously to the United Nations General Assembly. We know that food and climate is inextricably linked to many of the issues that are being discussed right now at the UN. We're hearing about conflict all over the world. We're hearing about geopolitical issues. We're hearing about food insecurity, global food insecurity. And so all of these things are definitely made worse by the planet warming. And if we don't address them in our own homes, if we don't address them locally, how can we solve them globally? So I'm really excited to have this conversation, talking about what's happening domestically, but bringing it to this bigger global picture. And it really does come down to food insecurity. We are not gonna have stability on this planet if we have hungry populations. So that's what we're gonna be getting into: access, security, availability of food. And I'm thrilled to have experts on this stage who work in this space day in and day out. So everyone's been introduced, so I'm not gonna waste any more time introducing. Everyone's very Googleable, right? So please look everyone up and get connected, stay in touch. It's one of those communities, right? We all work together ultimately. So I'm gonna throw this first question to you, Erika. You stated this fact, which just blows my mind, is that in the United States, food insecurity impacts 1 in 7 people and 1 in 5 children. And that seems shocking. We're the wealthiest country in the world? Are we still? People love to say that, regardless of who's running for office. That's a stat we hear all the time. So how is it that this is true? And then talk to us about innovations, right? There has been technological advances that can address some of this, especially digital platforms. So talk to us a little bit about some of the innovations you are actively working in to deal with this.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to take a minute and just go back and think a little bit about what Karen just said, because I think we're all going to be talking today about access for people who are food insecure. And that's really like feeding the need we feel today. But I listened to Karen, and a lot of the things she was talking about is really looking forward to how we fix that need. How do we make food more accessible in community grocery stores and farmers markets? And at Feeding America, we're not only looking at how we work on feeding the need today, but really that ending hunger journey. And I'm really delighted to be part of this panel, because together all of our organizations are working together to drive that food accessibility. Coming through the pandemic, our latest USDA numbers, like you said, are as high as they were during the pandemic. Need has not gone down for food in this country. There are a lot of factors that drive that. The economy, wages keeping up with inflation, pressure on housing, pressure on healthcare. Food insecurity is largely a symptom of other challenges families are facing. So we're working really hard. It's great to see that we have this kind of whole supply chain of activities to make sure that we are looking at technology and innovative solutions to connect food surplus. We're all here on this stage to look at food and that new EPA wasted food solution. We want to keep food that companies and farmers and producers have put together, produced, that is meant to delight people. We want to keep that food in the food system for people wherever possible. So capturing that food, that surplus food, before it becomes food waste is what we're working on. And making sure that we have technology solutions that can be responsive to farmers' needs. I'm sure that Julia will talk about 24/7 needs of farmers who might need help to move food, surplus food from a field or a pack house, to work with retailers, to work with their inventory control systems, to work with their markdown systems, to make sure that we're moving that food real time into community food distribution organizations. So I'm sure we'll hear a lot from this panel, the way that technology can really be an opening for access for people facing hunger.
And so, Nick, these issues have become relevant to you recently, maybe not recently, but you started the company to address food waste, but increasingly you've been thinking about access and affordability. So talk a little bit about what spurred that interest.
Yeah, it's, forgive the voice, by the way, allergy season for all. It's interesting, these weeks inspire me because of the collective impact of so many different types of organizations. And I think that's why it's important that we all spend time together. And FlashFood is an example of that, where it was really about this problem of food waste, but then you find out there's other problems that are inside of that are maybe unknown, and the access to quality food was what really came up. What we found from shoppers as this was launched and has continued to expand is that oftentimes hunger is actually hidden. You think of hunger and you think of those who are, maybe who we passed walking in today, but there's hunger that are inside of homes right now, and there's hunger for good quality food. So many people are forced to eat ultra processed or things that are not healthy because they're inexpensive. What FlashFood has done is taken food that wasn't going to be donated, wasn't going to be done with anything other than thrown away, but it's quality and it's fresh, and gives it to people at half price, right? It's just a marketplace that's connecting food that is perfectly fine. It was just destined for a dumpster instead of somebody's stomach, and it's connecting. And it's amazing what that has inspired in us, the innovation that we're now putting into it. We thought we were solving food waste, and we are, but we're solving something that's even more important, and that's just the dignity and the access to delicious, high-quality food. And I'm looking forward to hearing about other examples throughout the rest of this panel and throughout the rest of today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just thinking about that, it's not like this technological advancement necessarily. It's just redistributing. It's
a lovely app. I'd love to say it's the greatest technology in the history of the world. I can't exactly say that. It is a really good app. But no, these are dumb problems that should not exist, and yet they still do. And so as long as dumb problems exist, smart, committed people should still try to solve them. And that's what we're trying to do.
I love that. Thank you. So we're talking about technology. We're talking about just practical, common sense solutions to some of these things. Julia, talk to us about optimism and the role of optimism in all of this.
Sure. With climate, I feel like it's so easy to, here we go. Optimism. It's the driving force of showing up again and again when something inevitably goes awry, and there's tensions and opposing forces, but I think optimism is what reminds us of why we love food, why we continue to fight for everyone to experience the right to life. And I think optimism is what truly drives Farmlink. We were born by college students that witnessed the unraveling of the supply chain during the pandemic. A lot of us studying different things in college, and really just felt called to just start calling as many farmers as possible, just because we couldn't stop and stand by what was happening. And just to know the two truths, the reality is that there's 100 billion pounds every single year of food. We only need 8 billion a year to meet food insecurity in the United States. We could do that, right? There's plenty of resources there. There's not a scarcity. There's absolutely an abundance of resources, and therefore we should go do it. And I think that optimism of we should just dare trying is just part of the spirit of climate, because I believe climate is a movement of the celebration of life, and that's what food is the greatest vehicle for that.
I might steal some of this language. This is good. This is why we need the next generation. This is why we need these intergenerational conversations, for sure. So global hunger, big challenge. Domestic hunger, big challenge. Food security issues, and just access, right? And we have technology, we have just common sense problem solving, we have next generation hyped up, optimistic, ready to go. All right. What are you gonna add to this discussion? No, so the
Where do I begin?
He told me to throw whatever I wanted at him. He was like,
I'm
paint,
ready.
I can
I'm
talk
ready.
about
I'll just
paint.
take that and run. I don't even need a question.
Go for it. Go for it.
If we're talking about accessibility, affordability, affordability I mean, not to go too broad, but it's like we've got a broken form of capitalism that creates massive inequality, and like that, we're not going to fix that here today. So like I'm going to focus on like people don't have enough time to eat healthy, like they work multiple jobs, like it's just the challenges are long and hard. But in terms of like, you know, food waste, improving accessibility, I can just talk about what Sprouts Farmers Market does as a retailer, right? We're $7.5 billion in sales, so we move a lot of food, we move a lot of produce. 20% of our business is produce. We're in 24 states, 425 stores. So I can talk about that from a retailer perspective, right? So we approach it multiple ways. We work with the farmers on the ground. We try to be as local as possible, and we try to take as much of their crop as possible. So as little goes to waste on farm as possible, because we can pick up their entire crop. Now that helps us, that helps our margin, because we can get it at a better cost, and we can reinvest that for the consumer. And we try to take a really aggressive approach on pricing in produce. That's been our leader since day one. You know, back in the day, the folks who formed this company, the family that formed this company, put produce in the middle, and they said, we're going to make this really affordable, 10 to 30% cheaper than anywhere else, and we're going to invite people in, because you can't pantry fill with produce, so it's going to get people in more often. It's healthy, and then they're going to learn our store, and they're going to hopefully learn how to eat healthier. So we do that with farmers. We also build our stores within 250 miles of our distribution center. So we have 7 distribution centers. We do that so that the food is fresher. So you reduce time on truck. It's fresher, better shrink, better margin for us, right? This is triple win stuff when you're in business, but it's fresher for the consumer. So when they buy it, it's fresher. They can bring it home. It has longer shelf life, better taste profile, less chance of it going into the garbage can. I mean, so we approach this, and then it's really a lot of discipline around operations. You know, when you've got 33,000 people, hourly workforce, you have to have the right culture that cares about making sure that the food doesn't go into the garbage can at the end of the night. It goes into the bins in the back of the store, either compost, animal feed, or most importantly, to partners like Feeding America. So last year we donated 30 million meals to people, 400 partners linking with Feeding America. And so you know, it's prioritization, it's everyday blocking and tackling. I mean, this stuff doesn't happen easy, and so that's what I'll start with.
No, that's great. And so these are products that we want to see on the shelves, and we want to see expanded, right? And that's great, because Erika, you might need a job, and in a good way. If you're successful, we're not going to need Feeding for America anymore, right? So the entire mission ultimately is to not exist anymore, because we've solved the problem. And in that case, maybe we could go work for Brendan.
We're hiring, we're growing.
Yeah.
But talk to us about this. Why make yourself obsolete?
You know, it's easy for me to say that I hope to be out of a job. I also need to say that Feeding America has been working at this for almost 50 years. So there's a lot more work to do, and a lot of work that we all need to partner on to do. It's a big, complex problem to solve. I was thinking about listening to the technology threads through the conversation so far. Dignity, I heard access, I heard fresh, wholesome, nutritious foods that people need. My vision, I was actually in a part of Chicago called the Englewood neighborhood last week. And I was visiting a pantry that serves that community that has an accessible grocery store run by a nonprofit organization. And as I was sitting with the food bank team and this community organization, the goal was to shut down the pantry, because we make the grocery store sustainably accessible for that community. So the work needs to come from many different angles. Something as basic as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, EBT cards, used to be called food stamps when I was young. That's part of the Farm Bill that's currently being renewed right now. It's been taking a long time. But thinking about how folks who have access to SNAP benefits, one, they need to know they're eligible. I was just looking at the 5 boroughs in New York this morning. 31% of the food insecure people in this area are ineligible for SNAP benefits. So looking at benefit cliffs, looking at eligibility levels, SNAP can be good for business. SNAP can bring folks into Sprouts to shop. SNAP can be used on FlashFood products. SNAP can be used in farmers markets. So really thinking about a holistic approach for community gardens and food access and resilient food systems within communities, accessible grocery stores, and communities where it can knit into the community fabric, and benefits like SNAP, making sure people know when they're eligible, and then really working on these benefit cliffs that make that sometimes a loop that folks end up in where they can't look at jobs that might pay more because they'll lose their eligibility. So lots of different ways, that's a technology that more and more locations are putting in place.
Okay, I love that. Let's talk about solutions. Let's talk, FlashFood. FlashFood, but you did that on purpose, the naming of it, right?
Yeah,
So,
I
yes.
wanted to get Flash Flood as it's perfect. Much more news clips that way.
Exactly. That's why we're called We Don't Have Time. It shows up all the time.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing.
So how does FlashFood fit into the ecosystem of solutions?
Well, she just mentioned it, but SNAP, whenever we added that payment methodology, it opened up an entire new opportunity for individuals. I mean, I'd spent 20 years running grocery stores, right, and companies that did that. And donation is very important. Markdown is very important. Order optimization is very important. There's just way too much that's over-ordered because, candidly, all of you expect grocery stores to be perfect all the time. And your expectations are creating waste and creating the problems that all of us are now trying to solve. And I'm saying you, I know you're trying to solve it too, but I mean, it's the truth. When you go to Europe, you don't see stores that are jam-packed with lots of product. You don't have to have tables that are full of every perfect orange ever. You have just what is needed for that day. Mm-hmm. And so what we're trying to do is to get the tail end of those things, those items that, are maybe too small or too, couldn't be donated or whatever else, and solve for that. And what is interesting, I was listening to Brandon, produce is our number one item that's on there. And it's this mixed thing of just one apple here, one pear there, one pepper there that maybe wasn't going to be used for anything else. Maybe it has a divot in it, but it's the number one item. And I love when I go on TikTok and see what these home chefs are doing with these items. I mean, they're creating things that are feeding their families, creating inspirational. I mean, it's fun. Like, there is a fun element to this as well. And so I appreciate that everybody up here is also doing social media, because it is important to engage your shoppers, your stakeholders, into everything that's going on with it.
And are you finding that this is for Julia, but just to transition, that there are certain demographics that are more amenable than others? And I'm leading to say that it's easier for the next generation to kind of get on board with this. No?
But you're wrong.
Oh.
And so that's what's so interesting in this. I thought that too, but the data has shown something very, very different. Boomers are very, very involved in this, very involved. If I look at the demography of our shoppers and where there's the most action right now, it really surprised me when I started to look at cohorts and who's more engaged inside of this. And by the way, they're on TikTok as well. So it's not just I'm Gen X, I'm the forgotten generation, but millennials and others, it's not just you too, Brandon? Listen, we're actually good people. Gen X needs to be talked about at some point. It's out there. But it's amazing how it cuts across age, and it's amazing how it cuts across income. There are a lot of people engaged on this, actually.
Okay. So would you agree with that, Julia?
Absolutely. I think the multi-generational work is like what it's all about. Farmlink just happened to be started by college students, but we are now 4 years in and have many industry professionals that have been in the industry for 40 plus years that joined us, and we're a very diverse group across all generations, absolutely. And we need them, and they need us for different reasons. The first person that comes to mind is our head of farmer advocacy, Mike Meyer. I would say he's north of 60. And we could not have evolved like we have in the last year without his support and his knowledge and his community that he's built on trust over the last 40 years. And that's truly at the forefront of our ability to move hundreds of millions of pounds over the next couple of years, is truly because we have included people from all different generations. So it's absolutely integral to the success of this work.
Nice. There's still room for all of us. Amazing. So I do actually have a question for you. So how do we get the next generation excited about farming, right? And not just about farming, excited about all of the new advances in farming, because there's this dearth of interest in joining agriculture, from my understanding, as somebody not immediately working in this field. And so you're very much at the forefront of this. How do you get the next generation excited about agriculture?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, first I'll say I agree with everything everybody's been saying. I mean, it's a really interesting point you brought up where it's like, if there's the last kale
It's crazy.
And it's fine. And it's fine. Well, I know Alice buys it.
This is not
We want to
the
be like you.
audience.
That was a stupid question with Alice in the audience. But the rest of you, shame on you. Tools are super important. Just really quickly, and then I'll get to that, I promise. Is like you're absolutely right. Like running grocery stores, like inventory management, computer-assisted ordering, like managing all of that is so critical. And then working with farmers too. I mean, because we talk about affordability, input costs are going up, labor's going up. And we all know there's a challenge in labor and fair wages, et cetera, but labor costs are going up. Water costs are going to be going up in California. And so how do farmers, change some of the technologies they're using to reduce their input costs, make it more efficient, et cetera? That's a big challenge, requires a big investment. And we all know the challenges there around subsidies and then borrowing and some predatory lending and all sorts of things that happen in that space. To get to your point, you're right. There's a mass retirement of farmers. Everybody's around the age of the person you mentioned on your team, 60 something, and the next generation just hasn't developed as much of an interest in carrying that on. You see some of that legacy growing. You see some of that legacy carrying on, usually on local farms or people transitioning back after going off and doing something else, studying something and coming back and wanting to work on the farm, but it's not happening enough. And it's certainly not happening enough with diverse farmers. So there needs to be a lot of investment and support from organizations like us up here, like businesses like Sprouts, building scholarship programs, building training programs, investing in the nonprofits and other partnerships that are educating farmers on this, connecting people back to their food. We have a massive disconnection from our normal day lives and where our food comes from and the soil, et cetera. And so we need to really work on bridging that gap. And we do it through a lot of ways, some of the ways I alluded to in terms of scholarships, in terms of investing in school programs that are building the next generation of farmers. We do a lot of that work through our foundation. And we try to find local farmers that are family farms, and we try to support them and buy all their crop to support the local communities. So there's multiple ways to do that, but it's a big problem, and it needs to be addressed really quickly, because if we don't have people growing our food, it's over.
We need Taylor Swift to basically be like, the coolest thing to do is be a farmer.
Coolest thing to do is be a farmer, not an influencer.
Or a combination of both.
influencer.
Or a farming influencer.
Farming
There you go.
influencer. We
I'm
solved,
just
solved it.
remember I'm Gen X, so all I do is dump on influencers all day long. So
So we have a few minutes left. I wish this panel was longer, honestly. I think all of you do too. I'm going to turn it over to Erika, and then if you all have your kind of final thoughts to say quickly, I'll try and get to everybody. But Erika, we're communicating right now. We know how important communication is, and how is technology aiding in this communication? Advocacy is ultimately going to be what solves a lot of the issues that have been raised on this stage today. So talk to us about the importance of that.
Right. Well, it's really a connector, and I mentioned that you can't food bank your way out of hunger. That's something we say all the time at Feeding America. So building a bigger tent. Now, how are we advocating for universal free school meals across this country? How are we bringing in partners in housing, in healthcare, in utility assistance? Oftentimes, folks come into the Feeding America network through our community organizations needing help, and the connector for me is working really hard to build technology solutions so that we can refer and connect them to others in this big tent through these partnerships, so we can really address the root causes of hunger themselves.
Nice. I'm going to go to Nick, then Brandon, and Julia will get the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would go back to collective impact. We have one of the nutritionists from Stop and Shop that's here in the audience, and she does events where she brings all the different services together, teaches people how to do that. And I think oftentimes we look for these big, massive macro changes instead of going one family at a time. And that's what I love about the nutritionist that's working on this. That's what I love about what we're all doing as well. That does have a viral impact though, right? Like once you hear about those things, like social media can be a very powerful exclamation mark and get it to more folks.
Sure. Brandon.
closing remarks?
Yep.
Well, I mean, I'm sure a lot of folks in this room are privileged. So you have, you can have your food delivered, you can shop at your Whole Foods in, Lower Manhattan or whatever. So, for you, it's easy to do your research and say, I want to spend my dollar, at this company that does well and sources sustainably, et cetera. Not everybody has that ability. So I just think we all just need to work a heck of a lot harder and care a heck of a lot more in our space. I'm talking about people in my space, in my shoes, to try to change the system from what we can control so that we can deliver more for the people that are outside this room, frankly, and the people that need it.
Nice. Julia.
I think ask yourself, how can I include more people in this solution? Farmlink's grown solely because we've just said yes to working with as many people as possible, as fast as possible. And I think radically asking questions and learning as fast as you can along the way has been the key to our ability to make more of an impact and to invest in youth, to be participating in these things. I'm so grateful that this is what I did right out of college, and there's so many students and people that are trying to change their careers midlife changes as well that I think are to be celebrated. And I'll just say the last word on climate. This is absolutely worth fighting for. It's the only thing worth fighting for. And we have the resources available to us. We don't need to reinvent wheels and all these crazy technologies. We really just need to look at the basics and start listening and including more people. So I'm so grateful to be on this panel to talk.
I mean, this is what's happening right out of college. I think we have a lot to look forward to. This is amazing. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for those remarks. Please join me in thanking all of the panelists, Erika, Nick, Brandon, Julia. Okay.